Hi, this is for English 100, Peggy Otto. Want to talk today about the personal essay a little bit more. I've had a few emails from people who wanted a little more guidance on that. I'm also going to just do just a bit of review over um, weeks 2 and 3, actually, what we've been doing as we build up to you're turning in your first draft of the personal essay. So we started out looking at critical thinking in week 1. Then in week 2, we switched to creative thinking, and you did several activities with creative thinking. You watched some videos. You did some exercises to develop critical thinking to help you understand what creative thinking, to help you understand what creative thinking is and how it's different from other modes of thinking. The exercise was interesting. The survey was interesting. I thought I would like to share the results and kind of use that as a jumping off place for discussing creative thinking. So there are 5 exercises to hone your creative writing skills. And the first one was the paperclip challenge. You were asked to think of as many ways, challenge number of 50, try to think of 50 ways that you could use a paperclip. So this exercises the flexibility aspect of creative thinking, that you can switch from thinking about something one way to thinking about it a totally other way, and then more and more and more, and keep thinking of different ideas. So it's all about more ideas for this exercise. And actually, from the results, I'm reading from the paper here where I took notes, but 62% of you had a hard time coming up with more than 5 within the time limit that you had, with more than 5 different ways to use a paperclip. But then on the opposite end of the spectrum, 8% of you could come up with more than 30 different ways to use a paperclip. So there obviously are some in the class who have um, a little more of a natural inclination to thinking divergently. And those are 2 terms that we'll be using that I'd like to just go over for a minute. You exercise divergent thinking to do the paperclip exercise. Convergent thinking literally means to converge around a single idea, structure, question, right? So convergent thinking is more logical, it's more linear. We think of mathematics and science as typically, and I would say stereotypically, um, set in that domain, although there is a lot of creativity in science and math, especially at the upper levels, theoretical science and math. So that's convergent thinking. Divergent thinking means thinking outside the box. That's the phrase we usually hear, is thinking outside the box. So that would be how can I turn this around? How can I expand it? How can I work through some of the self-imposed barriers that I have that are assumptions. Assumptions often put us into a box. And so by breaking through those assumptions, we can become better at creative thinking. So you can see right away that creative thinking is related to critical thinking and seeing the other perspective. So then that takes us to the second challenge, which was the upside down drawing challenge. And on that one, no one hit the top mark. Well, no, 23% of you hit the top mark of you were spot on. You did that drawing perfectly, spot on. That was 23% of the class, which was interesting. This is another aspect of divergent thinking, is turning it upside down, turning an idea on its heels, looking at just the opposite, right? Just the opposite of what an elephant normally looks like when it's turned upside down. So this is also related to visual perception, but it has to do with being able to take an idea and literally see what it would look like upside down. And so in order to do that, though, again, you have to get outside the box, because even when you see an upside down image of an object, your mind turns it right side up in order to figure out what it is. That's natural to our brain to perceive it that way. But to be able to stay in that mode of turning it upside down without, to get across the assumption of this is what that figure should look like, right side up. Turn it upside down. Look at it from the other side, or look at it from another side and see how it would look differently. Take a different perspective. And this is what you saw happening in the Helen Keller reading that you did. So we have the scene at the water pump. And then we have 6 different versions of that were actual versions that were developed over her lifetime. And you did some close reading of those versions and noticed how the story could change even when it's told by the same person over time, because you shift your perspective. You look at it upside down, you look at it from a different side, so you're changing the angle. So that's the aspect of creative thinking. So thinking outside the box, thinking from a different angle, all of those are both creative exercises. Then your 25 circles is related to the paperclip challenge, in that it asks you to very quickly be able to switch from one idea to another. So letting go of the first image in order to come up with a totally different image and not getting stuck with that first image. And that's a creative thinking skill that's really helpful for composition, because often we get stuck on a first draft, and we have to be able to let go of that sometimes in order to create a better piece of writing. And so it's hard to give up that first draft, that initial draft. And so but that's another aspect of creative thinking, is that I can go on and do something different, and then something different, and something different. And on that one, 23% of you all were able to come up with more than 20 different images in the time. So that was pretty good. You could do that shifting, and that's a skill to apply to your writing as well. Let me see it in a different way. Even if it's only a sentence, I've written this sentence, but I don't like it. So it doesn't do what I want it to do. So how can I totally redo this sentence, right? Produce something totally new, preserving the thought, but it looks different. It's done in a different way. So a new way. So 23% of you all did fill 20 or more. And then over half of you did between 10 and 20. So, you did moderately well as a class on that one. Image completion has to do with how you can build on an idea that's just a seed of an idea. So you had the upside down V, and you were to imagine what could go with that upside down V to create a scene. So you did really well. Nobody claimed to, well, take that back. I'm reading my notes wrong. 38% of you had a complete but not complex next to the highest. And nobody claimed to have a really complex, sophisticated image in the amount of time that you had. But 38% of you said that you thought you had a complete image, but it wasn't complex. And then more of you thought that you had a recognizable image, but not much detail. So again, this is a skill to use in brainstorming an idea for writing, for composition, is you've got a beginning, and you have to think about how to add details to fill that out so that it becomes a sophisticated and complex entity that started out with just a very simple shape in your mind. And then the final one was the 9 dots, which is kind of the classic for thinking outside the box. So you have 9 dots lined up, and you're supposed to connect them all without lifting your pencil. And the clue, of course, the secret to that is that you have to go outside the box to do it. You can't stay within that sort of box that's suggested by the 9 circles. You have to go outside to do it. A lot of you had already seen that before. But 46% of you, almost half of you, had the right idea. I knew I had to do that. I knew I had to go outside, but I didn't have time to get it all done. So good on that. So just to sum up then, creative thinking, and I want you to consider this in terms of this first piece of writing especially, is being willing to think outside the box, being willing to think of more ideas, and not only being willing to think of them, but being willing to revise in order to put those into being, right? In order to make something new out of it. So typically in writing, we start out with the divergent thinking, all the different ways that we can do something, and then we begin to converge on an idea and start to put some shape to it. Then we go back to divergent thinking again and say, what do I need to add? What big changes, what possible new starts do I need to make? Is there a place for looking at this draft? Is there a place for me to start again, to build, kind of like with the upside down V, to build a new image? So thinking outside the box, flexible thinking, those are aspects of creativity. And if you think about it, you know that that's important not only in writing and in school, but more and more important in the business world. People who do the hiring in corporate scenarios, more and more are saying that they want people who can do creative problem solving. The COVID crisis that we're in has really forced us all to do thinking outside the box. How can we make something happen and differently? And it's can be frustrating. It's much more fun to follow a pattern. It's easier to follow a pattern. I'm not going to say it's more fun. It is fun to think outside the box, but it's easier to follow a set pattern. That brings us to the 5-paragraph essay, which is the box, right? So let me first say that you can't think outside the box before you have a box. So we're not denigrating the box. The box is important. Writing has a shape. There are certain genres, certain expectations, certain things that you have to do. The syntax, the structure of your sentences, there's a certain way that things are made. You have to understand that in order to be able to creep outside the edges of it. But the 5-paragraph essay is taught from elementary school through high school as a pattern for developing a piece of writing. And it's a very useful pattern because once you've mastered it, it's quick. It's a quick way to frame your ideas. You can use it to answer essay questions on an exam. You can use it to create a speech. You can use it to write many kinds of essays in different areas. But as it is, it's really too simple a structure to allow for complex kinds of thinking. And so as you get into university studies, you want to kind of outgrow that without losing it, that knowledge about what a piece of writing is, what a composition is. So let's look at the positives of the 5-paragraph essay. The positives would be that it focuses on a beginning, a middle, and an end, right? And you can't get around that. You have to have a beginning, a middle, and an end, no matter what you're writing. And it also encourages us to remember that the essay has to be a single, unified composition, so that you need to somewhere set up a focus or a main idea that you don't go out from. We've all known people who start talking. I'm kind of one of them, who start talking about a topic and then they just go off here and they go off here and they go off here. And it's like, how do you make sense of that? How do you make sense of somebody who's always getting off the point? So the 5-paragraph essay encourages us to stay on the topic. It encourages us to think of a unified piece. It encourages us to think of a beginning, middle, and end. It encourages us to stay on topic. And all of those are very good. But where the 5-paragraph essay can mislead us is into thinking that we have to have a thesis statement in the opening paragraph that reveals what our 3 points are going to be. So we might say that farm subsidies are farm subsidies are a bad idea for the United States because they encourage overproduction, um, because they encourage overproduction, the use of excess pesticides and fertilizers, and limit the production of fruits and vegetables. So that would be an example of a thesis statement. Then what that thesis statement does is it binds the essay, right? So then you read that, and immediately you're going to know, okay, we're going to have a paragraph about point 1 and a paragraph point 2 and a paragraph about point 3, and then we're going to wrap it up with a reiteration of the introduction. So it's very straitjacket like for us when we wanted to do more creative types of writing. So I do not want to see a 5-paragraph essay for your personal essay, right? I want you to think outside of chronological order, and I want you to think outside the 5-paragraph essay. I want you to get past the idea that all paragraphs have to be the exact same length or almost the same length. If you look at the David Foster Wallace autobiographical personal essay, so it was autobiographical, but if you look at that, some of his paragraphs are long, a whole page, and some of his paragraphs are only like 2 sentences. And so think about the flow of the piece that you're writing. Sometimes we want a long paragraph to suggest that things are happening really fast. When the tornado starts to come, things are happening really fast. And so we don't want to break that up. So it's about pacing. Paragraph is as much about pacing as it is about topicality, having a paragraph for a different topic. So think about how you can modify that for your first draft, how you can create a piece that has a purpose, it has a flow, it has a point, and it has a beginning, a middle, and an end, but without falling into the box. See where you can stretch outside the box for your personal essay. So that said, if we were in person, I would say, now, do we have any questions? But since we're not in person, I will encourage you to email me with any questions, also to bring up those questions on the discussion board so that you can chat about them together. You have already tried out one idea, your initial first thoughts, and you condensed those, and you've gotten some feedback from the group. And now I've asked you to do your second set of initial thoughts from a totally different perspective. The first time I said, think of a time when you remember that you first really were able to express a new thought. You had a new thought and you could express it to someone else, and try to describe that thought coming into being and how it felt and so forth. So that was about the power of language, as we read about in the essay on the miracle of language. It was about the power of language, but the other side of that is the inability to express thought. What words cannot do, how your words or your sign systems, whatever they were, what they were not capable of expressing. So a time of frustration or anger when you felt that you couldn't. So I've asked you to basically do the upside down for your second set of thoughts. You can choose to do the same experience and look at it from a different perspective, or you can choose a new perspective, a different time, a time that represents better a frustration that you had with trying to communicate a new thought to someone else, to communicate a thought to someone else. And so that then you're going to post that and then get feedback on that one. Then I ask you to look at those, step back and look at those for your first draft as we start to build the first draft. Just step back and look at those. After you've produced the exploratory drafts, those two from opposite sides, you've gotten feedback from your peers in the class, and think about how you might go forward to make something new out of those. So your options could be to take the first initial thoughts and just expand that into a first draft. Find the kernel of it, the real gold in there, and rebuild that as a personal essay and to draft your first draft of your personal essay. Or you could choose the second version that you wrote and when it was difficult to communicate and do the same thing with it. So that's either the first or the second. And then a third option is to figure out, is there a way to include both of those in an essay that expresses your thoughts about the power and the limits of communication through words, through language. Whichever you choose, I want your focus to be on recreating the experience, not summarizing, not talking about it, but recreating it. And again, we'll go back to David Foster Wallace's Tornado Alley. He spent most of his time having you enter into that experience, describing it with the kind of imagery that allowed you to actually be there with him. But he inserted in that some thoughts about what was going on, some thoughts about why was it tornadoes that really scared him so much, and those bad dreams. And then here and there you'll find sprinkled through how he did that, how he was able to make this both about the very literal event that was happening and about the more abstract what was going on in his life and his mind at that time. So whichever version you choose for your first draft, keep in mind that example of Tornado Alley. I'm going to pull up now, I'm going to share my screen. I'm going to pull up the assignment itself for the final essay that you will be producing. Not right now, okay? We're going to produce a first draft that we're going to work with some more. But I thought a lot of you like to look ahead and work ahead. So I'm going to share my screen and I'm going to pull up off of Blackboard. There is a folder on Blackboard. Just bear with me a minute while I get there. So here we are on Blackboard, and if we look at content, pull that up, and there you see your weeks. But if you scroll down, the major essay instructions, this is a folder, and within that folder you have the instructions for the personal essay. That's the assignment with all the guidelines for it. I always get into a big hurry. I'm impatient. There we go. Personal essay assignment. So after reading the different versions of Helen Keller's Moment at the Pump, where she discovered the connection between words and thought, you are now ready to reflect on experiences that have led you to think in ways that were new to you. Consider experiences that made you think differently about an issue, topic, or debate, or through which you came to think differently about yourself or someone else. Choose an example significant enough that you feel your life would be diminished without it to some extent. Try to make it clear how thinking this new thought came about for you. Your challenge is to show it as best you can what the new thought was, and also, just as importantly, how you experienced that new thought coming into being. Think outside the box about how to organize your essay, something outside strict chronological development. And then I have a reading of Baskin that's included here to help you think of some possibilities. You can dig back into your writing practice session drafts for some flashpoints to explore. To compose a personal essay of at least 1,000 words on the topic of experiencing the emergence of a new thought. And we're going to work up multiple drafts of this essay and receive feedback from the instructor and your peers. The final draft will be due by email to me on September 25th. So your first draft is this Sunday. You're going to have that done and you're going to send it to me, and I'm going to give you some feedback on what you might do. And then we're going to work the next week over polishing that, revising it and polishing it. So the first step will be that first draft that you're going to send to me by Sunday, by this coming Sunday night. Again, your goal is to recreate the experience for an audience of your peers in a way that they can both connect with and receive insight from. You can choose your own audience. This can be either people who might have shared the same type of experience, and you probably got a sense of that on the discussion board where people replied to you, and your retelling might make them feel urged to rethink that experience on their own. Oh, okay, I experienced that, but I didn't think about it that way. So if you're sharing an experience that they might have some connection with, and you're showing how you are rethinking that, then they could see how they might rethink too. So you're offering them an opportunity to shift their thinking. Or you could choose people that probably never shared the same type of experience, but will understand people like you better after reading your essay. So I've never played sports very much. I mean, I like to play croquet and I like to throw horseshoes and things like that, but you know, team sports, not at all. And so I don't really understand that sense of camaraderie and accomplishment and so forth. I get it up here. I get it in my head that you work really, really hard for something and then it happens, and then the sort of elation of victory. But I don't understand it at the core. So maybe your goal is to help me understand better and go, oh, okay, yeah, I feel that. Yeah, I feel that. I feel your victory now. I get it. I get why it was that way. So it could be people that have experienced it that you're sharing with, or people that who haven't experienced it that you're sharing it with. So that'll help you think about the audience. It's always good to think of who you're writing to when you're writing. And so then I have included a rubric for you to use. And this is a typical kind of rubric with the introduction and conclusion and the main points. I mean, this is the box, right? But I've filled in the box in ways that ask you to think outside the box, especially under style. Pay special attention to that. Style and writer's voice are very important. Just as important as the introduction, conclusion, and organization. So use that. Maybe not so much for your first draft, but we will be using this when we revise for the final draft. So check my notes and make sure that I've covered everything. So I just mentioned the reading guide that I gave you. You can expect more of those reading guides because many of the pieces that we'll be using require close reading, and a part of what Introduction to Composition is designed to do, I think, is to improve your reading skills, because in order to be a good writer, you need to be a good reader. So those two often work hand in hand. If you're a better writer, then you get to be a better reader. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing now and come back and say that I know it's a little bit late in the week for this to be called an introduction video, but I'm going to probably be doing more of these kinds of shorter videos on helping you to conceptualize the assignments that we're doing. But remember that you can always reach out to me by email, and we can Zoom together or do a phone call if we need to. All right, so happy writing to you, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you have to share with me.